No, you just.
Okay. We're just waiting on the live stream and we'll be good to go again. Right, thank you, everyone. So we've got an amendment on the table. Glenn has spoken to it, and Councillor Morris has reserved his right to speak. So have we got any other discussion around the amendment? Councillor Sculler.
So just as a point of clarification, so those three are the only amendments to what we've seen before. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when we talked about to P, that wasn't a
No, so right now we're
just
just discussing those three additions as the amendment. Yeah.
From the staff in terms of the ability of the organisation to bring a paper.
If I speak to C, I know D and Paul will probably want to speak to C. So as the Chief Executive said, we're taking this to say what would be the process, we're interpreting this resolution to be what would be the process for council if it wishes to do an LTP amendment. We wouldn't be making any comment on the purpose that you would choose to do it for, but what would be the process, what would it be involved, and what would be the timeframes and the statutory requirements. So it's relatively straightforward. So yes, we can do that.
C might be a little bit harder in terms of it might be the interpretation, and just to get clarity, there is only a 24-34 long-term plan. There is no updated. It's the adopted, approved long-term plan budget. We can certainly do the updated debt figures as they sit now. If that is the request, then that information is readily available.
Chair, firstly, the debt figures would be very helpful because we haven't requested those. But the other is, I'm thinking particularly the OPEX budgets, just to get an understanding with some of the updates to the, what the current scenario is, basically, which was that Cameron Road Stage 2 is not currently looking very certain. And I think there are a number of factors like that. There are I've heard other projects which seem to have had higher operating expenses as well. So it'd be good to update those OPEX.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think really this essentially is just a financial and project update of where we are in the current long-term plan and any issues that have arisen over the last 2 months that you need to be aware of. This to me sounds like a project and financial update.
What I would say that we'd bring that back with a level of assumptions that we'd need to make around some of those NZTA projects and what the implication that would be.
Right, have we got any more discussion on the amendment? Therefore, Councillor Morris, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, very briefly, Your Worship, and be happy to speak to the substantive when we get there. But this provides us with the opportunity to consider next steps, if any, with regard to a potential long-term plan amendment. We've heard already this morning that Cameron Road is an issue, and I would venture to suggest that in order to become compliant with government's direction, a level of service change may be required there, which would trigger an LTPA anyway. I think this would be a very valuable piece of information for us to consider under D, so I support it.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yeah, just the date 30th of April. I'm just also conscious that Council may well be considering what we do with our three waters. And in the normal course of business, we try and tie that in with a a long-term plan, an annual plan, or an amendment to the long-term plan that would coincide and enable changes to take effect on the 1st of July 2025. And so we can report back to you how that date, 30th of April, might look like in terms of meeting our obligations around the end of the financial year and any changes that we might like to consider.
All right. Yeah, if there's no more discussion, then we'll put the amendment to the council. All those in favour, aye. Those against, no. Okay, the amendment is passed. And now we'll go back to the substantive motion, which is the full. Do people need a little bit of time to read through that again? Yeah. Right, does anyone have any discussion on? Could we maybe, is it possible to email that through to people?
I'm a little bit concerned with H that the overspend will be managed through other operational savings. However, in the absence of these being fully achieved, any resulting rating deficit will be debt funded. I'm not comfortable that we resolve that is open to happening, that we're resolving that could happen, because it should come back to us before that did happen.
We can ensure that through you, Paul, that we report back as to whether or not we've achieved those savings, and then we can work out how we treat that at a point in time in the future.
So if we suggested change would be after the comma where it says any resulting, if we change that to say, in the absence of these being fully achieved, this will be reported back to council.
So Jen will move that amendment. Have we got a seconder?
You can just.
We agree to, yeah. Yeah, Rod agrees, so, yeah, we'll make those changes. Have we got further debate? Yes?
So I'm just also wondering about the wording of G, that we're approving an operational budget overspend. Should there be some acknowledgement that it's just a repositioning of where that money's being spent? Is this a brand new overspend that we're having?
Well, I guess before it was not on the council books, being
Correct, but-
IFF.
So this looks as though, again, that we're approving an overspend already, and I'm not comfortable with that wording. I think I'd like it to say similar to the change we made in F, that we are, because of the transfer of funding onto the balance sheet, of previous funding onto the balance sheet, there will be that the servicing of that debt will also be on the balance sheet. I don't know, something we need in those words.
Through the chair, you would change the word overspend to additional, because the issue is there's an approved operational budget that doesn't include that cost currently. So you need to change either note the overspend or note that there will be approving by resolution additional budget.
Well, it's additional still suggests we're allowing more budget to do things, and we're actually not. We're hiding it before. Sorry, we were putting it in the IFF before, and now it's on the balance sheet. So I'm not comfortable that we're resolving already to have a 1.5 million overspend.
Especially when in fact it's actually a reduction in the interest cost, isn't it, in the long term? So I sort of agree with what Jen's saying. I think we need to just put a little rider on it, perhaps.
Yeah, there is obviously additional cost in the accounts which wouldn't have otherwise been there. How can we?
But if we could say notes that there will be additional unbudgeted costs as a result of using LGFA.
Or or is it replacing long-term levy?
No,
I'd say
because that's the levy is not on the. That's ratepayers.
I'd say through the chair for say and notes that the IFF levy charge commencing 1 July 2025 will not occur. But that. Yeah, and change the word overspend to additional. Addition. Yeah.
Additional operational budget.
You could add resulting in a net saving, if that would.
Yeah.
So you and Rod are
Yeah, so
comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that change. Rod, are you comfortable with that change? Yeah. Right, any other discussion around the substantive motion? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. I think it's important that we recognise why this decision is before us today, and that's because, as you can read in the agenda, and particularly the executive summary, there was a decision by the minister, and I understand thanks to the actions of coalition partners, to clip the wings of the commission in regard to the IFF and the Civic Centre. Clip the wings is probably too strong a word. It might be pull out the odd feather, because the government still allowed the commission to go ahead with a long-term plan amendment. So they own it. They own the consequences of this, as does the council, as does the city. The use of LGFA instead of the structure funding and finance levy is a small win for our residents and ratepayers. It's cheaper borrowing, but as other speakers have mentioned, the increased debt limits are not a target. So I do appreciate the comments from the Mayor in that regard. I know many of us, if we were empowered at the time that these decisions were made, may have made slightly different decisions or substantially different decisions depending on the mix. I think that we can acknowledge that some of the decisions that were made did not represent best value for money for residents and ratepayers. And for example, the decision to split the Civic Administration building from the Civic Whare was a very interesting decision, and part of the evidence that informed that decision was that the movement of councillors and council staff up and down Devonport Road and between meetings would add vibrancy to the CBD. That sounds crazy. It is crazy. And it shows you the level that some of those decisions were made on, in my view. We are where we are. There's tremendous sunk costs in this project beyond what is evident in the agenda, particularly when you look at other parts of the program. We are where we are, and I think that the decisions on the table today are in the best interests of the city, and given where we are in the best interests of residents and ratepayers going forward, given what we're up against. So I do support the resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Schooler.
I've just got, so can we just go to the, am I allowed to make another suggestion? So near the end, where we're authorising the contract, so authorise the chief executive to enter the main construction contract. Just in terms of, we're new, we've had a lot of information the last couple of weeks. We've been a little bit concerned with contingency funds and escalation funds and projects. We've heard a little bit about how they get authorised. Hearing one of my colleagues talk about some overspends, having a look at a potential change of scope of 90 Devonport. I would like to put some additional requirement on Jay that there is a limit, a monetary limit on any changes to that need to come back to council.
Through your worship. So there is a policy that addresses the process around how contingencies and escalation costs are spent. So if we can perhaps make a note in the minutes that I'll undertake to ensure that that policy comes back, or that policy comes to council for endorsement and change.
I believe that allows the chief executive to spend up to 250,000 on changes of project, and I'm not comfortable at this stage hearing what I've heard in the last couple of weeks, that's approved at this stage. So I would definitely, I don't want to leave it that we're just stuck on a policy that we haven't been privy to. So I'd like a comment, either we put a number in here that changes above 50,000 are reported to the council, or that this is subject to the council approving the delegation policy on changes in scope or the use of contingency.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we put another resolution here, notes that the policy on contingency is to be changed and reported back to council. It's actually not the CE's contingency, it's at the project contingency. Can we say for approval?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Rod, you comfortable? Okay, have we got anyone else that wants to talk to this? Councillor Correct?
I'm waiting for some others to speak to it, but I was going to leave mine till last. But given that we've got not any hands up, you better leave it to me. I've actually written a little speech, believe it or not. So, Councillor Morris, while it might be easy for us to blame the previous governance, saying that, you know, they locked in the project and it'll be, as Mahe said, money down the drain, and to stop it now, and we have no choice but to continue, you know, I can't. My voters will give me a whipping if I do. I've put on my desktop screen, which is about to open, my 150 words to remind me of what I said to my voters. Pretty cool, eh? Yeah. So when I read that, I think, no, I can't support this. I'm not convinced of the cost to delay or cancel the project. I think we need to talk to our builders and get the definitive number from them. It could be a whole lot less. And because while many are enjoying cocktail parties, we're leaving behind large sections of the community who can't afford the extra, Paul, $448 a year in their rates because they're struggling already. And a guy phoned me last week and he referred to this as a vanity project, which largely I think it is. Because while you might suggest it might bring 3 times as many people into the CBD, you know, I find that difficult because what we got here is some grand looking buildings. We were told when we allowed the university to build its building, you know, that the place would be so vibrant. There'll be people spilling off the streets. You drive past there now, there's tumbleweed going past the place, you know. So I don't buy into the value of this project. You know, imagine spending that budget on something that really delivers value to this community. You know, one project, Marty, the skateboard park down the mouth, or the boardwalks. You know, there's so much that this sort of spending could deliver real benefits to the community rather than stuffy old buildings there, which is actually on the fringe of the CBD. We've got a functional library, it's right in the middle of town. What will this grand new building provide in terms of an extra level of service? Very debatable. And that extra in rates, you know, I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, a landlord who owns multiple properties. He says, every rate rise I will impose on my tenants. And so we've got $448. The tenants will end up paying that. Rents are chronically unaffordable already. So to me, that is sad. But that, you know, we're heading already, and I see this in my campaign, at the end of this 10-year plan, in terms of total rates, TCC, Regional Council told me their rates, or its rates will be $1,000 by the end of this plan. That's what they're budgeting for. So $10,000 for the average property in rates by the end of this plan, but it will be more. Because we know as we go down the track, costs accumulate. So that would be a $6,000 if every landlord added it to the rent that their tenants pay. That would be an extra $6,000 that those people will have to pay. How will they pay that? I don't know. So we need to also, but bearing that in mind, we need to ensure that we maintain some fiscal capacity to deliver critical infrastructure projects. And this is why I was asking Christine about the situation, the bigger picture. By going down the track of this discretionary spending, are we putting at risk some projects that might have to be brought forward to allow some extra houses to be built? Because that's why we've got such a problem with affordability of rent and mortgage or whatever. Firstly, the supply and demand situation means that the cost of houses is so high, the young people have to have huge mortgages. And also for rentals, that demand versus supply is causing the landlords to be able to put up their rent by every dollar that extra they incur. So let's think about that. We don't want the community hub to become a homeless shelter, if it gets that extreme. And I'm not kidding. I mean, this is serious stuff. It's about affordability. While we sit here in our little cocoon, we've got to think about the real world out there, and it's getting worse. So as I said, the exit costs earlier, I said, I would really love to talk to our partners. These are reputable companies. We can sit around the table and come to a definitive number, but, I think the vote will go through, so it's not going to happen. But, I'm not so scared by the claims of that opinion by the quantity surveys in terms of what it costs to delay it, because that's my main thing. I don't want to cancel the bridge, but I do want to delay it, subject to a little bit more community consultation, some more definitive answers from our partners, and then make a decision that's responsible in terms of being where the community is at the moment, and not just those that are lucky enough to be invited to cocktail parties. We need to think about our people.
Thank you, Councillor Kurak. Would anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Rick. I don't know that we will forget all the people that that voted us in, and I take what you're saying about the cost of things certainly to heart. I don't think we had a lot to say with how this thing got off the ground and where it's going at the moment, but I do want to highlight the potential reputational damage that this could cause if we do halt the project or actually stop it. From our iwi partners through to the council staff that have put a lot of work into this over a number of years. I also look at the developments that are going on in town. What sort of what will it say about us if we stop this project when we've got a lot of private developers that are putting their own money in, as per previous discussions earlier in the meeting? So, yep, it's probably not the ideal way we've ended up having to make this decision, but I do believe it's the right one for this project to go ahead for the betterment of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Roseboom.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A lot's been said today, and it is a very emotional issue. Most of us got hammered by the subject through the entire campaign period. I do support the motion. I also have ended up landing on a point of I'm actually in support of the library contract based purely on the fact of the lost opportunity that we will lose if we do choose to either postpone, delay, or end. The cost incurred by the ratepayer to this point would be lost to the city if we do any of the others. This is the space I work in, supply chains, engineering, developing stuff. It's a lot of things have to line up to achieve a project of this size. And with the current constraints on our supply chain and supply chain network, I'm almost assured that a lot of the material that's going to be put into the libraries sitting in a warehouse somewhere ready to go, because they just could not afford to wait for us to make a decision. So they've taken a bit of a punt, and that's where some of the cost uncalculated costs will be attached if we say no. Around going forward, given all the issues that have happened in Wellington over the last month and a half, we're faced with some decisions that are going to be forced on us. And in respect to Councillor Crowther's amendment around an annual plan amendment, we may not have a choice. It may be forced upon us if decisions don't fall our way. So we've got a lot of decisions coming our way in the next, between now and Christmas, that are going to impact on the ratepayer. So I would suggest to all of us that we focus very heavily on H/2, the opportunity to reprioritise our spending and remove capital projects as required to keep the cost to the ratepayer to the absolute minimum, because we are going to have a lot of restrictions forced on us, not just with the Cameron Road Stage 2, not just with the inner city development, but also with Three Waters and other NZT funding that may not come that we've asked for. So we've got a lot to look forward to in the coming days. But that's where I'm standing right now.
Thank you, Councillor Roseboom. Are we done? As the mover of a motion, I'll speak last. So I think, you know, what I do have confidence in, and I'm not sure exactly how we got to where we are, and that is hopefully something that we will find out over the coming months. I am confident that the project as it stands right now, at about $306 million, is currently on time and on budget. And if we approve this today, that will continue. Talking to Councillor Kurek's some of his points, you know, that you've made them very well, but there is real cost, and you know there is sunk cost that of over 50 million, which is non-recoverable if we were to stop, and potentially, you know, there's a whole lot more on top of that, but which is the bit that we don't know. You know, ultimately we've got over $1 billion of private investment in the CBD, and I believe a lot of that has come because of the confidence that those private developers have taken, because council are looking to reinvigorate the CBD. And I think that is the right way to go, that council contributes, but ultimately private money is what funds a lot of that redevelopment and revitalisation. Obviously we've talked a lot today around the affordability and the rates, and I think that is something that we do have to take into account as we go forward, and as Councillor Kurek has mentioned, there is an opportunity cost. You know, by any decision we make is money that we spend somewhere that we can't spend somewhere else. So, you know, as we go forward, that is important that we understand that, and we are prioritising the projects that we need to in order to deliver for our people. So, you know, this is, as I said right at the start, a big decision to start off with. And again, I just thank all the councillors for all the work that you've done to get yourself up to speed in a very short space of time. Again, you know, there is a very real time constraint on this, because as we all know, any delays in construction projects end up costing, and you know, right now the contract in front of us is you know, predominantly the sub trades, and I think this in all times is you know, probably as cheap as it ever will. As we know, going forward, you're always better to do things today because it's going to be more expensive in the future. And with where the economy is at the moment, I believe there's a lot of sub trades out there that are desperate for work and will sharpen their pencil in order to make that. So that is, I guess, my summary, and I thank you again for the conversation. I would now like to put the motion forward, and I will read it out so we know exactly what we're voting for, if we can go through this whole thing. I will. I'll have a drink before we start. So the motion put to council is that the council receives the report to Manawataki Otapapa Infrastructure Funding and Finance, I think it should be, IFF, resubmission and library community hub contract. Notes the context of uncertain funding, financing and project costs, including but not limited to Manawataki Otapapa and National Land Transport funding for key Tauranga transport projects. Request staff to provide the 16th of September council meeting with updated 2024-2034 long-term plan projects, budgets and detailed financial reports, including latest debt figures. Request staff to provide the 16 September council meeting with an issues and options paper on a 2024-2034 long-term plan amendment to be consulted on by 30th of April 2025. To Manawataki Otapapa Infrastructure Funding and Financing Levy confirms that council will not continue to use an IFF levy as a financing and funding tool for Te Manawataki Otapapa at this time. Proceeds to secure approval through local government funding agency for increased debt covenants for the Tauranga City Council. Notes that in the absence of an approval for an increase in debt covenants by 30 November 2024 or further evaluation of the impacts on credit ratings, a further evaluation of impacts on credit rating impacts negatively on council's borrowing. Council will receive a further report on potential financing and funding options within the borrowing limits that are current at that time. Notes that the IFF levy, which was planned to be introduced on 1 July 2025, will no longer occur. Approves the transfer of previously off-balance sheet borrowing of 54 million to on-balance sheet borrowing, recognising this will now be financed through the LGFA and not the IFF financing model. Approves a 2024-2025 additional operational budget of up to 1.4 million, being the amount of funding required to service additional debt borrowing based on the estimated cash flow, and notes that the IFF levy charge previously commencing 1 July 2025 will not occur and results in a net saving to ratepayers. Notes this overspend will be managed through other operational savings. However, in the absence of these being fully achieved, this would be reported back to council. Confirms that there will be sufficient funds available to fund the capital costs of Te Manawataki Otapapa, noting that the council has the option to achieve this by introduction of a rate targeted or otherwise commencing from 1 July 2025 and or reprioritisation, including changes in scale and timing of the capital program from 1 July 2025 onwards. On the construction project, authorises the Chief Executive to enter the main construction contract with LT McGuinness Limited for the Library and Community Hub in accordance with the parameters specified in confidential resolution N. Notes that the policy on the project contingency to report it back to council for approval. Notes that this final civic whare exhibition and museum contract will be presented to council towards the end of 2024 for consideration and approval or otherwise. Retains attachments 4 and 5 in the public excluded section to enable council to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. Attachments 4 and 5 can be transferred into the open on completion of the contract. Well, that was quite a mouthful.
Well done.
So I now ask for all those in favour, please say aye.
Could you put that in parts, or at least put, which one? J as a separate part, is that possible?
Okay, so we'll, do you just want J separate or do you want the? Just J, okay,
They can go up to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I now ask then all resolutions other than J, all those in favour say aye. Those against, no.
Division,
Sorry,
division,
Oh.
that's where we read out the,
yeah,
yeah, who voted
Yeah.
what, and it's
Yeah.
recorded.
okay, a division, please raise your hand if you're aye. Everyone is aye?
Everyone's on.
Yep. Now we'll go to. Yep. And if we go now to J, all those in favour, aye. Those, those against, no. Okay, a division again, can we all have in favour, aye? Against? Oh, sorry. Okay, so we've got against Rick and abstaining, councillor Crowther.
Abstaining, councillor.
Yep.
Apologies, Mayor Mahe, K to me fitted in with J because I wanted the authorisation to be part of, understand the delegation for changes.
Okay, I think K though that's a separate issue.
I was quite comfortable when I asked for the change for it to be part of J, but it was suggested to be a separate point.
Well, I think the policy is coming back to council, which we will then have an option to discuss. So, those motions are both carried. Thank you. So now we can move on to discussion of late items, which there are none. So now we would like to move into a public excluded session. Note this resolution is different from the one in the agenda. We do not need to consider attachment 1 and 2 to item 11.1 in confidential, as these have been moved into the open. We are adding confidential attachment 5, confidential Ryder Levitt Bucknell theoretical termination cost advice. I call for a mover and seconder to go into publicly excluded. Okay, move Rosenboom and seconded Schuler.
You don't have to read it out.
Yep. All those in favour, aye. Those against, no. Yep. And I declare that motion carried. So now we'll just have a pause.